5, 4, 3, 2. Oh, what's up, homies? Welcome
What's up,
back
homies?
to another Invincible comic book review. Today we're covering another tie-in to the Invincible universe. We're talking Invincible Presents Adam, Eve, and Rexplode Volume 1. Here it is. This is a really special book, and it feels like it's kind of smack dab in the middle of the larger Invincible series, like the whole run. It feels like we're about halfway through with that. And we are now taking a little bit of a detour to smell the roses and read this prequel comic that sets up the characters of Adam Eve, Samantha Eve Wilkins, and Rex Splode. I had read it before. Augustine, had you read this before?
No, you know what?
What?
I feel like I had read in a origin story, but I think it was what was provided in the Ultimate Collection. Like, at the end of the volume, they have that short
Yeah,
introduction to the characters. I didn't know about Eve's siblings, but we'll get into that
we'll get into it.
later. But this is my first
So,
time reading it through.
and also the first time reading it for Adam. Let's just
Mhm.
jump in, gentlemen. I had read this before and I love this book. And it's a
Yeah.
big part of the reason that I love the characters of Adam, Eve, and especially Rex. And it was really fun just rereading the whole series with you guys because that early Rex Splode is such a dick. Then we had
Mhm.
the now, because of the show, the Jason Mantzoukas voice added to it, that kind of attitude. He's such a dick. And yet I knew a couple things were going to happen. I knew we were going to get to that point in the series where he sacrifices himself to save people. And that just happened in the last volume of Invincible. And then I knew we were going to read this, which is an expanded version of that little quick origin that we got in I forget which volume of Invincible back then. And if you read this book, which was not written by Robert Kirkman, but written by Benito Cereno, and the penciler and inker was Nate Villagarde, colorist Bill Crabtree, letterer Russ Wooten. Fantastic team. They were tasked to basically expand on that little like few pages origin of Rex.
Mhm.
So yeah, man, I this is a 5-star book for me. I freaking love this book. I thought the art was like it was like next level in the same way that Ryan Otley stuff is next level, but like in a different way,
It feels like
and it
early
was
Ryan Otley stuff. It feels like
it
Ryan Otley when he's still trying to find his way into Invincible.
mhm, mhm.
And I say that only because like there's some very gratuitous Adam Eve butt shots in this in this
Yes, there
comic.
is. Yes, there is. And there's
And
also
like
lots of like
unnecessary nipples poking through stuff and I'm just like,
yeah.
okay, cool.
And
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
there's also a
But
lot of
not to
like
take away from it.
sure, there's also a lot of like kind of gruesome, disfigured, monstrous, horrific
Mhm.
type creatures and
Yeah.
monster stuff, which also feels very like Otley. And I thought that the writing on this was also so solid. It made me like those characters. I was invested in the furthering of the plot. And we can get into the specifics, but that's my overall thoughts. Adam, first time reading, we just got the death of Rexplode. What did you think of this comic?
It was really good. I I guess I should have assumed going into it that it was gonna touch on some like very heavy subject matter, and I think the thing that I really appreciated though was it didn't like shy away from kind of just going into the depth and the traumatic sort of like experience that these two characters have had prior to the Invincible series. And it's like heartbreaking. It's genuinely heartbreaking seeing how Samantha and Rex kind of come to be.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it was kind of heartbreaking to watch his dad. And Erickson even calls it out, and he says like, your dad traded you for steak dinner. Like,
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
really mean that much to them. So
Right.
I really enjoy those types of moments. And I know that in the comic book, obviously his story has kind of concluded as far as I know, but the animated show has like given me so much more to love about that character. And now
Mhm.
kind of knowing the arc of that character, and on top of that having this backstory, you kind of look at that character so differently. And it really
Yeah.
sort
Yeah.
of recontextualizes that character. And for Samantha, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, you always kind of look at her as a character that you're like you feel very empathetic for and sympathetic towards, because you know that she's been through some stuff. and Rex kind of piles that on as well. But it's heartbreaking to see, what she goes through, and she ends up basically being a child who is like kind of abandoned but not abandoned. She's like left with a family that like, her dad has no idea what the outcome of it is going to be, and then you kind of see all those like things happening throughout the book. And so it was a really eye-opening and interesting kind of perspective on both of these characters, and seeing kind of like early versions of their costumes, and multiple versions of some of their costumes, and then seeing their like actual OG, what we come to know in the main series is cool, and how they meet and all that stuff. So I really enjoyed it for that.
Yeah. Augustine, are you as mad that the Invincible series killed off Rex Splode as you are that the MCU killed off Black Widow?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I'm not as mad, only because I feel like in Black Widow they gave it and they took it away. I feel like they did for Rex. They didn't necessarily let me connect with him and his new family with the Guardians as much as Black Widow did with the Avengers. Right?
I get that.
But
I get it.
That's not to take away from his role and his sacrifice. Like, he legitimately blew himself up and a mark, an other dimensional mark to save people's lives. And that's a massive, like, I didn't know that Rex could have that kind of power, because potentially if we didn't have all these marks, he could have done that to actual Mark. Like, he could have really blown him up at a specific point, and then just, the story would have been completely different. So yeah, it's not the same, and I'm not as mad, but it's still sad to see him die in that way, to see him go in that way, because especially after reading this, it's tragic. Adam was talking before the show that this comic was kind of heartbreaking.
Super. And without spoiling the Black Widow movie, isn't it interesting that this is like a prequel that we're reading that is about also these characters like family situations, in the same way the Black Widow movie is like, oh, here's a bunch of characters that are kind of Black Widow's family members in a way. So we have the Adam Eve stuff, her being a government experiment, but the scientists like fell in love with this homeless woman that they kidnapped basically, and then she has a horrific fate later where she's just forced to pump up more kids, and which was messed up in the tube.
Fucking hard to look at.
It was. It really was. And this is coming from 3 readers that have been reading Invincible, which is uber violent and like eyeballs popping out. And we turn the page and it's just so like sad. It was hard to look at that panel. Don't put up a picture of that panel. Don't do it.
No. It reminded me of something from like Eon Flux. You remember that cartoon back in the day? Like very kind of weird techno, like
cyber
kind of like
techno
gory
body mutilation type stuff.
That kind of stuff.
And then Eve is adopted basically, but the adoptive parents, they believe her to be their biological daughter, their kid that they also lost. And it's a tough family situation. And then at the end of this Eve book, she learns that she has younger siblings that hate her, and then they die when they prove like useful, or like their use has ended. And then she changes her framed photo of her family to like what her mom looked like, her scientist father, and the siblings in kind of a nice, and it's just brutal. And then we get to Rex's stuff, and we knew that he sort of had a difficult home life. And there's even a line, I think, in the animated series where Eve says something about high school, and I think he says something like, oh, you know who didn't get to go to high school? Me. Like he is a dick about it, but he had this messed up thing that we haven't gotten to in the show yet. He gets recruited by the government. He gets experimented on. He doesn't know that he's killing people.
I mean, him laying on the bed, or on like the I don't know, words are escaping me right now, but his arms are cut open. Experimenting on him on the hospital bed. Yeah. And I was just like, oh my God, this is horrendous.
That's how he gets. Yeah.
And then you see him in that costume and running around. I made the comment. I was like, he looks Deadpool-y. Like, it seems like they made a very conscious decision to design him in a particular way, so you as the reader look at it and go, there's something off about this. There's something not right here.
He's killing people. He's killing people working for an agency that he thinks is the good guys, but it's not, which is such a classic sort of superhero or sci-fi story. I mean, with both of these combined in this one paperback, Augustine, I feel like we kind of got it. But what were your overall thoughts of these two specific stories?
It's very tragic. Although I don't want to call it like stereotypical because usually when we see a superhero origin story, it has to do with either messed up or dead parents, and that is like the root of everything. And we've seen that in comics and time again. What I feel like is special about these two is that they go sort of like through the teenage years, which we don't usually
Yeah.
see in a superhero. So
Yeah.
what did Bruce Wayne look like in his teenage years? We don't know because we never explore that. But here is when they explore their powers in their teenage years, and especially
Yeah.
somebody like Adam Eve exploring the fact that she can manipulate anything with her powers when she's pushed to do it, which we saw here,
Yeah.
but we also just saw it when she fought Conquest. So
Healed
like,
herself.
That was
Yeah.
crazy.
yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, and I'm glad we saw a glimpse of it. We got to see some cool powers that she does, where she covers herself in that pink crystal stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She
that was
chops
really
it-
cool.
She chops one of her brother's hands off by using like the little pink shield kind of
Yeah.
thing. So I think it's really cool to see these kind of things because in the comic book, we're basically in the original. I'm sorry,
Main run.
in the Invincible main run, we mainly see her like using punches or energy blasts, but now
Mhm.
she's really kind of manipulating things. And I think it's really cool to see Rex kind of flexing his powers as well,
Mhm.
even though he doesn't know he is. Like, just like when he touched the dude's glasses, and just the sligest
Yeah.
touch of the dude's glasses blew his head off.
Yeah.
So it's little things like this that I really enjoyed from this comic, and I want to stay away from calling it stereotypical because of the parent thing, even though it kind of goes into that. But I think the way it was written and the homework that was given to the writers by Kirkman was very well executed in these two chapters, because now
Yeah.
I feel like everything that I know from these comics is going to inform me and make me feel so much worse if anything happens to Eve in the comic book.
Yeah.
And well, I mean, R.I.P. Rex. So
Yeah.
if you look at the very back in the concept drawings, there's a little drawing of Rex in the clouds, and it says R.I.P. Sweet Prince.
Yep.
And then it has a little halo over his head, and it's a nice little tribute to. Yeah, there you go.
1980. Who knows? To
Good night,
2000. Who
Sweet Prince.
knows?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
So,
also.
yeah, it's really funny.
I also want to mention that when we watched the show originally, Kill Cannon was the first adversary that we
That's
met.
right.
Yep.
And I had no clue who it was, because I
Yeah.
don't think in the book we had met Kill Cannon up to that point.
No, no,
we
correct.
had seen him. I think we saw him like once or twice.
Yeah.
but they never named him, and
Yeah,
that's
that's
why when we
right.
saw the show, we were like, "Who's this guy?" Like we
Yeah,
didn't
and then
really
people
know
were
who
like,
it
it's
was.
Kill Cannon. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to that part of the book yet, so I don't know.
Yeah,
It's great
exactly.
that this book sort of makes him Eve's arch and
Yeah.
nemesis, which is really
Nemesis,
neat.
yeah.
But
We
I kind of like that though, in a sense, because
Yeah.
like having watched the show, you at least have like a little bit of context, and then some of the but
Right.
now you see him here, and you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also I think the end of the book, when Rex goes and presumably is going to kill his father,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and he sees a little kid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
new
That's the thing
family.
that,
boy.
like, family,
Mhm.
and it's like that's the thing that stops him. I'm like, man, we like really just kind of pin this thing
Mhm.
into the book of like how, like, who Rex is and how he feels and where his moral compass is, and
Mhm.
just I just thought it was like a really nice touch to kind of like end it off, because he could have been very
Yes.
much the same kind of character that we meet originally, where he's just like, nah, whatever. But
Yep.
Right.
you kind of definitively make a statement about what kind of person he is. Through
Yeah, that he's
was
ultimately
great.
that he's ultimately good, and that he's
Yeah.
going to look out for the good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he made the ultimate sacrifice. So yeah, like he was a good guy.
He made mistakes. He knew he made mistakes. And this was also really great to reread, having just read the funeral of Rex Splode, and Adam Eve
Yeah.
was
Mhm.
really moved, and then
Mhm.
you read this and you go, damn, dude, they really were there for each other in the beginning.
Mhm.
And
They
Rex
were
had to
homies.
screw it all up.
Yeah.
Screw it all up by cheating on her like an
Stupid.
idiot.
Stupid.
Considering how awesome Eve is. But
you were in her bedroom
um,
the night you met
Eve
her.
is
Yeah.
now like Adam Eve is
Yeah.
now like that girl next door kind of super crush, like
Mhm.
Winnie from the Wonder Years,
Yeah,
and like that kind of character where you don't want anything bad to happen to her,
I love
but
that
it's
know.
almost
character.
like
She's awesome.
Rex really just kind of let it get away from him, and that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
who she'll always be to him. So
And
yeah,
and
it's really interesting.
I'm going to give you a spoiler, Adam, because I feel like it will enhance the rest of the series. And the spoiler is
Mhm.
this: Rex does not come back. He is dead permanently. And when Robert Kirkman
Look
has
how
talked
sad he
about that, it's a bummer, dude. But here's the deal: Robert
Yeah.
Kirkman has talked about that decision in the story, and so many things in the Invincible series. They are commentary on what the big two do in their stories, Marvel and DC, what they do in their superhero stuff. Robert Kirkman's Invincible universe can do things that those other companies can't, frankly, do.
Right.
And
Mhm.
and one of those things is permanent death, and Kirkman has talked about that. You know, he like just in the last volume, he wanted to do a big, massive crossover, epic thing in one issue, as a way to comment on how the other companies will do Civil War in its 60 issues with all this
Yeah.
tie-in and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And Rex's death is another one of those things where he wanted to have it be long-lasting and impactful. And so I don't want you to read the rest of the series thinking that it's going to be sort of typical, you know, superhero MO where it's like he may come
Mhm.
back or there'll be something else or
Mhm.
whatever. But there is still technically a cloned body of him in the series, and that's
Mhm.
Robot.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of he
Little
still sort of
Rudy.
lives
Yeah,
on in a
still
way.
kind of
Little
around.
Rudy.
Yeah.
Still kind of around, but the Rex that we know and the one that I love is gone permanently, and I think it's one of the best things about the Invincible story overall. And I still kind of miss him to this day, but he had a good run, man. He was a character that like kind of got to the end of his character development. I'm sure that if he didn't die, Kirkman would have found really interesting things to do with him. Kind of like how we're watching this Loki show where it's like that character
Mhm.
died, but then they found a way to, you know, keep telling the
Mhm.
story. But you know, he went out like a hero, and we're gonna miss him very much. And guys, if you're ready, we can get into the next Invincible comic that we're reading. You guys ready?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just gonna be
Yeah.
sad as shit sitting here
I'm
thinking
okay.
about what you just told me.
Don't be sad that he's gone. Be happy that we had time with him, Adam. So before we head back into the Invincible main series, we are going to continue chipping away at the Astounding Wolfman with Volume 3. We're going to jump back into this.
Dang.
There's only
Okay,
four
okay.
volumes total. There's only 4 volumes
Mhm.
total. So this is really like the penultimate volume. And that means
Mhm.
we're winding down with the Wolfman stuff. And will he continue to appear in the Invincible main series after his stuff wraps? I don't know. We're going to find out. But Astounding
Mhm.
Wolfman Volume 3 is next. Guys, let us know in the comments below what you thought of Invincible Presents Adam, Eve, and Rexplode Volume 1. Would you want to see other Invincible characters get their own sort of prequel comic? I, for one, thought it was hilarious how we saw, why is Invincible not in this comic book starring Omni-Man? And then he goes and does a thing, and he's like, boy, I wish my son had his powers already, because he didn't have them yet. But let us know what you thought of the book, and if you love Rexplode more now that you've read his sort of tragic backstory. And we'll see you guys in a week. Go read Astounding Wolfman Volume 3. Thanks so much for watching. Share, like, subscribe, comment, tell your friends about it. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.